Hi, so I'm here with Elliott and John. They're the filmmakers behind The Frontier Ukraine. Really hard-hitting documentary. Welcome.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good, yeah.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, Fusion in London.
Welcome.
So yeah, if one of you could just give us, I've obviously seen it, but give us a brief synopsis of this film.
It's a film that documents the conflict in Ukraine, so between the separatists, which are Russian-backed, and then the Ukrainian state, which comprises of normal soldiers and then also volunteers. A lot of the people we followed were volunteers. It also incorporates the downing of flight MH17.
By pure coincidence, you happened.
We were there, and it just happened. We were close by when it happened. We were able to go, and yeah, it was like a crazy experience, wasn't it, when that happened?
It was, yeah. No, really intense. What else haven't you covered? Yeah, we spent a lot of the time both with the Ukrainians, and we tried to get to see the other side of the separatists, pro-Russians as well, and stayed in Donetsk, which is like their stronghold for total like over a month.
Did you say it was a ghost town, Donetsk? I think you said off camera. Was it?
It was quiet. It wasn't quite a ghost town. A lot of people had left, but there was still, the odd family there. But they had a curfew, lots of soldiers. It was like a very surreal place.
And there was martial law, so there was quite a lot of. If you did anything minor, there was quite severe consequences.
Really?
So yeah, and people's cars were getting taken for the war effort as well. So a lot of people had stuff confiscated.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a nice environment. As a journalist, you were kind of protected. But the locals, they were kind of victimised. A lot of cars got stolen. We saw that happen, didn't we?
Well, you just took it.
Yeah, the soldiers would take it and say it's for the war effort, because it was under siege. Basically, they declared the city under siege.
So yeah, martial law.
So they're able to do what they want, and they apparently shot a couple of people for looting.
Well, I think at a later stage as well, I heard that they said to a lot of businesses if they didn't come back, because a lot of people fled to the fighting, they wanted the city to kind of get back to normal.
Yeah.
So they basically said to a lot of people, if you don't come back and reopen your shops, etc., then we'll take over them, basically. Because people were scared of the fighting, but they also wanted Donetsk to succeed as a city, so they wanted people to come back and keep it going, basically. And I think a lot of people didn't, so essentially got all their businesses and that taken.
It's a very profitable war. Like, that's obviously a big part of why people get involved in it, and also why it gets prolonged, like the one in Ukraine has, because so many people benefit because they can steal with impunity, they can treat people how they want. It's
I bet people are
paradise,
I bet people are treated like scum. Women. God only knows the kind of war crimes that go on against them. But it's.
Well, a lot of the wealthy people actually, there were underground car parks, and they all put their cars in there and then sealed the car parks during the entire main part of the conflict. So
really?
their cars weren't stolen. So they were given a heads up, like, put your
Mercedes down there.
Steal them. Because and one of the times we were there, we heard a story of gangs of separatists who were going around and blowing out the backs of car parks and stealing cars, even though they were sealed, like blowing them up with explosives, the concrete.
They could still get through.
Yeah, and then just taking all the cars in a lorry and then selling them, driving over into Russia.
But a lot of things that was quite funny on both sides was they had a lot of the cars they would kind of use in the war effort. So you'd get like really nice 4x4s or whatever taken, just spray painted it green with like a couple of squiggles on as camouflage.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that on both sides, just because they were just under.
Or they'd be out the sunroof with like a 50 cal just lying on top of like a really nice Porsche Cayenne or something like that. It's just really strange, but it was difficult to film all the time because we weren't. Well, with our press passes, we issued them ourselves from our company. Because
that sounds a bit dodgy.
Yeah, it was a bit dodgy, but it's the only way we could get credentials to go over to the east.
So what did you decide to make? How did this all kind of come about then? Did you just up and say, "Oh, that looks interesting"?
Yeah, well, we actually both met, and we were living in South America for a point in time, and we both met in Colombia, and we both talked about how we wanted to make a documentary, and then that was when the Maidan revolution was starting. So we both talked about that, and then months down the line, I was still in South America. I think you'd come back, and then.
And then I just said, we need to just do this. And the day you landed,
I just figured I might as well, because I saved a lot of money to go. I still had a bit. I was like, you know what, I want to do this. So, and I just came straight back. And I'd been away for like 3 years, and then went.
And you just went, screw it, let's do Colombia.
Straight to Ukraine.
Let's do Ukraine. Sorry. Oh my
But I
God.
mean, it was while we were still in the moment as well, because obviously you have that kind of excitement about doing something. It's better to just go and do it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll start thinking about it, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it was a little bit risky.
It was really tough, to be fair, because we kind of got there. We didn't really know how we were going to do it. As we got there, we met a lot of people, made a few contacts in Kiev, but that's obviously quite far away from at that point. At that point, Maidan it kind of happened, but the whole centre of the city was a complete. It was crazy. It was like imagine Trafalgar Square as like, having
Rubble.
tyres, and bricks everywhere, like soldiers walking around. It was so mad.
Well, Maidan was the revolution where they overthrew like the pro-Russian government, and that's what started the whole thing. Because then Russia annexed Crimea in response, and then they supported the separatists.
And this went on
just
and on.
wanted to destabilise Ukraine. But
so then we figured that to actually film anything, we'd have to go to the east where the fighting at that point was happening.
So, but when you're in Kiev, I think you said off camera, that's pretty normal there, a nice place to visit.
Yeah, it was.
But as you went further and further east, it became more and more dangerous, I guess, and more lethal.
Saying that, we were having beers one night and we were trying to work out when we were going to go to the east, and someone said, "Do you want to come out to my car?" And he had like body armour and machine guns and grenades, and he said, "You're going to have to buy some of this stuff because it's really dangerous." And we actually didn't have any money, so we're like, we can't afford it. Sorry, it's like body armour's like $2,000. People think it's really expensive.
Is it?
Yeah. So we never had body armour.
I think he was maybe just trying to have a go.
Well, when you say body armour, you mean the torso?
The actual thing is cheap, but the plates are really expensive. They're like ceramic plates, and they're like $1,000 each.
Oh, it's the actual material inside them.
Yeah, the actual thing's cheap. They're like £100. But like the actual plate's expensive.
So you get different types.
We never
actually did
them. So we went out on patrol, and all these guys were like beefed up and had all their gear on and their helmets, and we're just like with a coat and the cameras, and that was it. Which that is when it was stupid, but we literally couldn't afford it. Like we didn't have the money to pay for that stuff.
And how hairy? I mean, obviously we encountered a lot of situations. But give us an idea of what you.
Well, I mean, initially we went. We went from Kiev to the east to a city called Mariupol, which was pretty dead quiet. A lot of people had left because there'd been a lot of fighting there. But when we arrived, it was just kind of
it was
just
like
a bit surreal, a bit dead.
Stronghold of the Ukrainians.
Yeah, they'd taken it. Separatists had taken it. The Ukrainians had taken it back, and then we struggled for a long time to find anyone willing to talk. None of the Ukrainians wanted to talk to us. Everyone was very suspicious of us. What we were doing there. What was the we didn't have any background.
And they hacked your email and things.
Yeah, a lot of weird things happened whilst we were there. But we were there for a long time. We were getting very frustrated not being able to get any footage, kind of thing. And then we did manage to do a few interviews and film some stuff. But then MH17 happened, and that kind of really pushed us to push ourselves even further. Then after that, we went into Donetsk on the train. Well, you could still do it.
There'd been battles at the train station in Donetsk, so I was like, we can't go yet because they're shelling the station.
They're fighting each other, yeah?
Yeah, in the station. And then there was a brief window, wasn't there? And we got one of the last trains that went between Mariupol and Donetsk. And we got on the train, and there were all these kids coming back from the dance festival in Poland or something. They were coming through. They weren't getting off.
Cross the best bit. They wish I'd stayed.
Well, no, but then we told them we were making a film, and they thought we were famous. So then there was this queue of kids, and they were getting our autograph. They didn't understand that we weren't actually film stars. We were just so it was the weirdest half-hour journey of signing banknotes and stuff for these.
But that was a big decision to go to Donetsk because we argued about it a lot because I thought we should go. We didn't know the when. So we tried to make some contacts there first before actually going. Yeah. And then we literally just did take a train. And then actually when we got off was pretty bad because we got off, we had all our bags on. So we didn't know what to do, what the best way to play it was. So we figured we'd just get off. It was just a normal train. We had all of our bags on. Got off the train, started walking off, and we just heard people starting to shout at us in Russian, which obviously we don't understand Russian.
Well, and then they pulled us down. They kicked the legs and pulled you down. So we were just.
And then they had us at gunpoint, and they were shouting at us.
Well, he was a teenager, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Pulled out
they had
really?
civilian clothes on, but it turns out that they were undercover separatists, and they thought that we were potentially bringing in. Guns or whatever.
Oh, so they went for your stuff, saw your cameras?
No. Well, initially that's what I thought. I thought we were getting robbed, but then it was actually it was separatists at the station looking for anyone Ukrainian who might have been coming in to do something like that.
So when they sussed out who you were, they were okay?
Well, luckily Elliott had met this guy called Sandro. He made contact with him on, it was like sofa surfing or something.
Couch surf.
And he was a journalist. He was already in Donetsk. And luckily, we had his number, and we're like, look, speak to him. He speaks Russian. He was Brazilian, but he spoke fluent Russian.
Yeah.
And he basically talked them down. Was like, no, and all the time the guys pointing a gun at us, like they were suspicious the entire time.
Fucking hell.
And then they calmed down, and then they like packed our bags up, and they're like, oh, thanks, mate.
Yeah,
and really
nice.
friendly.
And then we had to go and register at the government building in Donetsk, which they'd taken, like, it was like I don't know what it was.
Because there's no embassy, British embassy, they pulled out.
No. Well,
there's
there's
only an
nothing in
embassy in
Donetsk.
Kiev.
It was like the
There is in
government.
Kiev.
Yeah, there's one in Kiev, but there isn't any in.
But yeah, it was a big government building in like the centre of Donetsk, and a couple of weeks, I think, before we arrived, they had taken it like by force from the Ukrainians, and it was the maddest place because we went in, and that's where we went to get our accreditation and all that stuff. That's where we were told to go after they had searched us at the station.
Oh, well, when they put the guns down, they told them.
Yeah. They said we had to go there and like show who would take our passports, etc. And then we went there and we got all that in like process. But then I remember we walked around with the camera, and a lot of this isn't in the film, but some of it is. And we just managed to walk around, and they'd literally completely ransacked the whole building. Like it was completely, every room like completely torn to pieces.
Barbed wire, and there were Molotov cocktails by all the windows because they were worried about getting stormed again. And they'd made.
Well, so they were ready with the Molotov.
Yeah. Because
petrol on a rag.
The first time we went there, they were literally, and it was just the lobby was completely wrecked. They just stormed the building, and they hadn't actually done anything to it. So yeah, it was just like under siege basically, the city at that time.
Yeah.
And when I know you happened to be there when MH17 went down, so how far were you from the crash site?
I think like if you were to drive like by the
20 kilometers
how the crow flies, it was real close, but to get there was a real mission because of all the checkpoints. Just everything was a nightmare to get to actually that point. But technically, we were pretty close. We were in Mariupol, and yeah, I think it would have taken an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe to drive there.
Because a basic road,
on a normal day,
you couldn't do that, yeah.
Yeah, but we couldn't do that.
Well, we had to basically skirt the Russian border to try and avoid the checkpoints because we just had a taxi driver. He was scared about his car getting seized or something. So we went through all the dodgiest checkpoints and right up close to the border. And the shelling got louder and louder because we actually crossed the front line, not obviously where people were fighting, but the point of embarkation between Ukraine and the separatists. And once we got through there, we felt a bit more relaxed. But then there was a major checkpoint into the Torres, which was like the village into the town. And they gave us loads of trouble, didn't they? They were like proper rough fighters. They've been fighting since the beginning. One of them, they were just wearing, they looked like pirates, didn't they? They just had all sorts of clothes, different guns, like World War II.
Well, that was more on the way out. I mean, I did get a bit scared more on the way out because we were aware that we just got in. I mean, we didn't know how we didn't expect to get in and manage to film that much. And then once we filmed it, we thought actually, well, we got quite a lot of like crazy stuff here.
Yeah, when you can, if they went through it and found it.
Yeah, exactly. And if they could delete it, because we had before, I had a checkpoint, they wouldn't let us through for hours and hours and hours, and I was taking photos just in a field just because I was just didn't have anything to do, and there's lots of sunflowers there, and they ended up shouting at me, and they ended up, they really got mad because obviously then they're suspicious if you're taking pictures near a checkpoint because they think that you could be doing it as kind of surveillance, so they can use to attack it. Yeah. So they made me delete. We had like a few days worth of footage on there, and they made me delete everything.
Well, after that, you've got to be more careful. I think it's just that learning how sensitive they are with anything to do with the security, because that's how a lot of the checkpoints are attacked. Is someone drives through, takes pictures, then
feeds the info.
At midnight, someone turns out and shoots them all. So they are aware.
And it is the situation there is so grey. It's so confusing, I think, for everyone involved, especially in Donetsk. Half the time, nobody knew who was shelling who, kind of thing. Like, it would happen, but we tried at some point trying to get answers about who had been bombing who, and everyone's got a theory, but it's impossible to tell what happened. I mean, there was a point, which I think is in the film, where they bombed like a driving test centre or something, and I think that was the Ukrainians, was a plane or something, But then there's just so many questions for us. Just like, I think at that point the Ukrainians were trying to get the civilians out of the city because they wanted to essentially storm it and take it back over, but they didn't want to do that with civilians there. So I think what they were trying to do is scare the civilians to leave the city so they could therefore
But it was
try
a
and take
really
it by
kind
force.
of brazen way of doing it, because even though it wasn't populated, if there'd been anyone there, I mean, they dropped an entire load of ordnance from the jet. Like the car park was literally lifted up and turned over. It's like someone had ploughed the car park.
And turn it all upside down.
Yeah, it was a massive. And
Just with a bomb, or set a
no,
bomb.
they dropped all of. One of them didn't explode, and there was that little girl jumping up and down on it.
What?
And we said to our friend who spoke Russian, I'd tell her to get off that. There was just a big lump of like soil, and the bomb was in it, and she was jumping.
And then they
up
were
and
literally taking it out, weren't they?
Yeah.
These two guys were just taking a bomb out of the road, but I think it had blown up.
Yeah, but they just had a spade and they just like take bits of the bomb out. It wasn't secure.
But it was very confusing, like the situation there, because obviously we came from, like an English, like Western background, where you kind of think, Russia's bad guys kind of thing like that, and we went in like that. But the longer we stayed there, more confusing it was. I mean, I think there's obviously the things like MH17. I think we are, 100% sure of what happened there, and that's something that needs to be, there needs to be justice for that. But I mean, there are things that were so confusing to us that we learnt the longer we stayed there, just kind of more confusing it got about who's in the right and who's in the wrong.
Well, a lot of people were unhappy in the East, and Ukraine hasn't invested any money in the East. The roads are terrible. It's basically a big industrial region, so there's loads of terrible pollution. The healthcare is bad over there, so you can understand why they're dispossessed and feel
the way they do,
angry against Ukraine. But obviously taking out guns, and the way Ukraine dealt with it wasn't great. They allowed it to grow, which is the worst thing.
But I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, you can just say, it's you can't do that. I mean, you can't take Ukrainian sovereignty and say that this is not now Ukraine.
But there's loads of reasons why it got
worse. No, that's true.
Complicated.
But then if you add in the mixture of like there being conflict in the East, some of the like little villages around in the East are just, really so sad to see these people, because they basically had a lot of all their supplies cut off by whichever side, and they're just stuck a lot. They're just so fed up.
There was that woman and her daughter had spina bifida and she couldn't move, and they were like, we went round with who was a friend in the end, Dima, who was a soldier, and he delivered aid in this van. And it was just the box with like tins of fruit and all that, and that's all her food because she couldn't get out of the house. This old woman.
Yeah, it was really heartbreaking to see that.
Skinny, she just couldn't move. She was on a bed, and it was terrible.
If you, I don't know, it's a bit of a silly question, really. If there's a takeaway from all this, I suppose it was such a complicated thing and situation involved in. But what sort of really, above anything else, sticks out in your mind about the whole experience?
I think for me, it's just I kind of learned not to. Well, it was crazy going from conflict to coming back to, say, London, and then just sitting on the tube and just seeing, people complaining about things like
first world problem.
They're ridiculous.
Yeah, my mobile phone's not working.
You have no idea what you're talking about, and people weren't like waiting for the tube. But then you live in London, then you end up finding yourself doing it yourself. Complaining about stupid things. But the other thing is just like I was saying earlier, how kind of foggy a lot of conflict is, and how it is so difficult to figure out who's in the right and who's in the wrong, because a lot of these people are good people trying to do the right thing, but maybe they end up doing something bad or get caught on the bad side of things. But
they called it the fog of war, though, don't they?
Yeah, no, but it was.
For me, part of that fog of war thing is no one has a clue what they're doing. All these leaders and generals pretend they talk the talk in the media and everything, but you see them when they're acting, and no one knows how it's going to play out. No one knows how this attack's going to work or whether this is a good tactic. They're all just winging it, basically, and that's the worst thing, is they're winging it and they're playing with people's lives.
Yeah.
And yet to them it's like, sometimes you can see it as a game. Some of the soldiers kind of loved it. You could tell they enjoyed the fact that they got to carry a gun and all that. A minority, but then a big enough minority that they had an impact where they wanted it to go on almost. They didn't want it to end. But everyone else wanted it to end because it was so terrible. The population wanted it to end.
Yeah.
It's a terrible
Yeah,
thing.
no, it's terrible. It's terrible. What else did I learn from it?
Well, I just think the one takeaway as well is how people can be so kind, and helpful and kind, even if they they don't know you or they don't understand you. Like we said, some people were suspicious, but so many people just helped us.
Yeah,
they didn't
that's
expect
true.
money, they didn't expect anything. They just wanted to be.
They're just decent people, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they wanted you
exactly,
to show
on both sides,
show
everyone
their
was so
suffering,
nice.
basically, and they wanted to like show what's happening, and we'll help you as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Like without them, we couldn't have done it. I mean, they made the film possible because they allowed us to move around.
Definitely, and that was on both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, there obviously you get the odd person who would treat us badly because, you know, if they find out we're English, they wouldn't be nice to us, particularly essentially because of that. But
You'd think they wouldn't be bothered about it if you're British, would they?
no, but I think more on the kind of the pro-Russian side.
Right.
We got a lot of the older generation. It's like as soon as we got there to the government building, went outside. There were a bunch of old people hanging outside. I thought, we'll do an interview with them. And then as soon as we had Sandro, the Brazilian, translating for us at that point, and as soon as they found out we were English, they went absolutely ballistic and just started shouting at us, and we just didn't know what the hell they were shouting, you know, what they were saying to us, which was kind of a bonus because we didn't know. We could tell they were very angry.
A lot of the grievances harks back to like World War II.
World War II,
they think we didn't help enough, and Britain like sold Russia out for something. I mean, it's all the propaganda. They're all from, you know, ex-Soviet states, and they've been brought up with this Russian lie about, you know, how they were victims in World War II. I mean, I know they did suffer, but
a lot.
So we all
helped
did
as much as they could and all that. But that's one of the reasons they dislike.
But it's weird because a lot of the propaganda out there towards Ukraine was basically like, you know, reused World War II posters. You know, that they just revamped it, and just there was one that was like 2000. I think it's in the film, one 2014, and one from like the Second World War.
Well, they framed the Ukraine as fascists because of certain. Like we spent time with Azov Battalion, which was a neo-Nazi battalion, and they formed out of football hooligans basically.
Yeah,
and they became.
really
They got like
interesting,
we went to their base, and they got one of the biggest tank battalions in Ukraine, and there must have been 50 tanks, big like heavy armor. They didn't have the fuel to run it, but they had those tanks. And that was one of the reasons that the separatists framed it as a fascist thing, because there were divisions like that were, I mean, they were kind of racist.
No, I mean, there's a lot behind that going on. But I mean, the thing that just for me is amazing, is confusing and like amazing, is that they had these like, you know, neo-Nazi battalions, but they were kind of proud of it, and they kind of like, they had this. There were a lot of people in the East were like, oh no, the Ukrainians are, you know, fascists, etc. But it's almost like there's a lot of the battalions that from the Ukrainian side wanted to kind of like push that and like and say like, yeah, we are, and we're going to come and get you, and it just kind of created like a lot of fear.
Azov had
and more.
Well, like it was more publicity for them. That's what they wanted, the fame of it. Like Azov had the wolf's angle, which is one of the SS symbols as its logo, and they used to have rallies like burning torches and all that. And at their base, they had, it's something to do with like Nordic history, but like 3 massive swords, like a statue, and that's tied into like the myth of the SS as well. So like they weren't like doing it subtly. There was a lot of parallels, and you can understand they didn't make it. Most Ukrainians obviously aren't neo-Nazis, but that division got so much attention.
But they also did a lot to, like Mariupol, where we were staying when we first went there. They were heavily involved in liberating it from the separatists, the Azov battalion. So a lot of Ukrainians like had a lot of they loved them for fighting for their country, because at that point when the president got ejected, they didn't have, their military was a complete mess. They didn't have anything, and basically it took civilians to come together and kind of form these battalions, which actually they were the ones doing it. They're the ones that had the balls to do it. So I can understand why people love them so much, but there is,
they're like folk heroes because they paid for all their own ammunition, and everything was done off their back. So you understand that, but then the beliefs were kind of brought in after they gained that mythos. I think it helped them push these neo-Nazi ideas. But yeah, again, it was just really complicated because it's much more complicated. Not all of them were that bad in Azov. They just joined because it was famous. So they weren't all neo-Nazis.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
That's what you got.
But it's interesting, especially because like the whole far right kind of issue around the whole world kind of thing. From there, it's kind of just seems to be growing and
expanding. Worrying. It's worrying. Yeah,
so it is mad from there, seeing that there, and then seeing the situation now. It's crazy, and actually, I think they have a massive following.
Well, they've got a political party now. I think Azov has got an equivalent political party, and it's gaining quite a lot of ground in Ukraine.
Wow.
But I mean, at the moment it's an era where these right-wing groups are getting a lot of
Yeah,
exposure
it's
and a lot
happening
of
everywhere.
popularity.
Yeah, no, it's happening everywhere.
Unfortunately, they just happen to have like a tank battalion and loads of guns, which isn't that great. But
Yeah.
hopefully it'll calm down, you know. But
Brilliant.
who knows?
It was really interesting filming with them, to be
Yeah.
fair. I mean, it was.
The whole thing was interesting because we had no idea about anything. We'd never been to Ukraine. We didn't know anything about the war because it was new when we got there. It only just started. So we were there right at the start, which was really interesting because we saw it develop, saw it turn into a full-scale conflict, and you know, in the time we were there. And then when we went back, we saw how it turned into a stalemate, and there were like, you know, divisions between the regions now, and they were like separate entities. So,
Cheers, guys. That's it.
Yeah.
No, great.
problem.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Lovely speaking
Thank you
to
very much, Elliot.
Cheers.
No, wonderful.